The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by the large window in their private quarters. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. William would be leaving for a humanitarian mission that would take him away from home for 6 months. She had always known that royal duties would demand sacrifices from their family. But this mission was different. It wasn't just another royal tour or diplomatic visit. William had volunteered to lead a critical relief effort in a war-torn region where communication would be limited and safety could never be guaranteed. The palace had tried to dissuade him, suggesting other senior royals could take his place. But William's sense of duty ran too deep. Catherine remembered the conversation they had shared the night before when William first mentioned the possibility. They had been sitting in their favorite corner of the drawing room, the fireplace crackling softly as their children slept upstairs. William's face had been serious, his blue eyes reflecting both determination and uncertainty. "They need someone who can bring real attention to the crisis," he had explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone whose presence will make the world take notice. Kate, I have to go." She had known in that moment that arguing would be futile. When William set his mind to something that served the greater good, nothing could change it. It was one of the qualities she had fallen in love with all those years ago at university, and it remained one of the things she admired most about him, even when it meant personal sacrifice. Now, as she watched the palace staff beginning their daily routines in the courtyard below, Catherine felt the weight of what lay ahead. 6 months might not seem long to others, but for a family with young children, it felt like an eternity. George was just beginning to understand the complexities of his future role. Charlotte was in a phase where she needed extra emotional support. And little Louis still asked for his father every night at bedtime. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her turn. William appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his formal attire for the morning's meetings. His face showed the strain of the decision he had made, but also a resolve that she recognized well. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they both looked out at the familiar grounds. "The children don't know yet," Catherine said softly, leaning back against his chest. "I keep thinking about how to tell them. How do you explain to a child that their father has to go somewhere dangerous because it's the right thing to do?" William tightened his embrace. "We'll tell them together. Tonight after dinner, we'll make them understand that sometimes being in our position means making difficult choices, but that we always come back to each other." Catherine felt tears threatening to spill over. She had been the strong one through so many challenges, the steady presence that kept their family grounded while William fulfilled his royal obligations. But this felt different. This felt like more than she could bear with grace. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "Not just about you being away, but about doing this alone. What if something happens to one of the children while you're gone? What if they need you and I can't be enough?" William turned her around to face him, his hands cupping her face gently. "You are more than enough. You've always been more than enough. Kate, you're the strongest person I know. The children adore you, the country loves you, and I trust you completely." But even as he spoke these reassuring words, Catherine could see the doubt in his own eyes. This mission wasn't just difficult because of the separation. It was dangerous. They both knew it, though neither wanted to voice their deepest fears. The region he would be visiting had been ravaged by conflict for months, and even with security details and careful planning, risks remained. "Promise me something," Catherine said, her voice steadier now. "Promise me you'll be careful. Not just for the mission or for the crown, but for us. For George asking about your chess games. For Charlotte wanting to show you her drawings. For Louis calling for Papa when he has nightmares." William's eyes glistened as he nodded. "I promise. And you have to promise me something too. Promise me you won't try to carry everything alone. Lean on your family, on our friends, on the staff. Let people help you." As they held each other in the morning light, both of them knew that this conversation was just the beginning. The real challenge would come in the days ahead, as they prepared their children for the separation and as Catherine prepared herself for months of single parenthood under the constant scrutiny of the public eye. The palace would soon buzz with preparations for William's departure. Security briefings would consume his days and media attention would intensify. But for now, in this quiet moment before the storm, They simply held each other and tried to memorize the feeling of being complete as a family, knowing it would have to sustain them through the long months ahead. 3 days had passed since the announcement, and Kensington Palace had become a whirlwind of activity. Catherine moved through the preparations like someone walking through a dream, handling logistics and arrangements while her heart felt increasingly heavy. The palace staff had been briefed, security protocols had been established, and the children's schedules had been carefully adjusted to provide them with extra stability during their father's absence. The hardest part had been telling George, Charlotte, and Louis. The family had gathered in the nursery after dinner, sitting together on the large, comfortable sofa that had witnessed countless bedtime stories and family moments. William had taken the lead, explaining in simple terms that he needed to go help people who were in trouble. People who needed food and medicine and safety. George, at 10 years old, had understood more than his parents wished he would. His questions had been direct and challenging. But why does it have to be you, Papa? Why can't someone else go? The pain in his young voice had nearly broken Catherine's composure. Charlotte, 7 and always emotionally perceptive, had crawled into William's lap and asked quietly, "Will you come back before my birthday?" When William had promised he would try his best, she had simply nodded and hugged him tighter. Little Louis, only 5, had been the most confused by the news. He kept asking when Papa would come home, as if the trip were just a regular royal engagement that would last a few days. Catherine knew that the reality would only sink in for him gradually, and she dreaded the moment when he would fully understand. Now Catherine stood in William's study, watching him pack the personal items he would be allowed to bring. The official luggage had already been prepared by his valet, but these were the things that mattered most to him. Photos of the family, letters the children had written, a small prayer book that had belonged to his mother. "The communications schedule has been finalized," she said, consulting the papers in her hand. "You'll be able to call every 3 days depending on the security situation. Video calls with the children once a week if possible." William looked up from packing, noting the formal tone in her voice. It was her way of coping, he realized. By focusing on the practical details, she could avoid dwelling on the emotional reality of what they were facing. "Kate," he said gently. "Come here." She approached reluctantly, as if getting too close would make the departure more real. When he pulled her into his arms, she felt the careful control she had maintained for days begin to crack. "I keep thinking about all the things that might happen while you're gone," she whispered against his chest. "George's football match next month that you promised to attend. Charlotte's school play, Louis learning to ride his bike properly, all the little moments that make up our life together." William stroked her hair, feeling his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "We'll have video calls for some of those things. And when I come back, I want to hear every detail about everything I missed. You'll have to be my eyes and ears." "It's not the same," Catherine said, pulling back to look at him. "The children need you here. I need you here. This family needs you. And those families over there need help too," William replied, though his voice wavered. "Kate, if I don't go, if I let someone else take my place when I know my presence could make a real difference, how could I live with that? How could I teach our children about service and duty if I'm not willing to make the hard choices myself?" Catherine knew he was right, but knowing it didn't make it easier. She had fallen in love with a man who put duty first, and she had accepted that as part of their life together. But accepting it and living it were two very different things. That evening, the extended family gathered for what everyone knew would be their last dinner together for months. Charles and Camilla had come from Clarence House, and Catherine's parents had driven up from Berkshire. The conversation was deliberately light, focusing on pleasant topics and future plans, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee, George approached his father with a serious expression. "Papa, I've been thinking about what you said about helping people. I understand why you have to go, but I want you to know that while you're gone, I'll help Mama take care of Charlotte and Louis." The maturity in his young voice brought tears to several eyes around the table. William knelt down to his son's level and spoke quietly. "I'm proud of you, George, but remember, you're still a little boy. It's not your job to take care of everyone. Just be yourself and that will be help enough." Later that night, after the children had been put to bed with extra-long bedtime stories and multiple hugs, Catherine and William lay in their bed staring at the ceiling. Neither of them could sleep, though they were both exhausted. "In 12 hours, you'll be gone," Catherine said into the darkness. "In 12 hours. I'll begin missing you more than I've ever missed anything," William replied. They talked through the night, sharing memories and making promises about the future. They discussed their hopes for the mission, their fears about the separation, and their love for each other and their children. As dawn began to break through their bedroom windows, they both knew that in just a few hours, their life as they knew it would change completely. The goodbye was approaching, and despite all their preparation, neither of them felt ready for what lay ahead. The morning of departure arrived gray and drizzling, as if the English weather itself reflected the somber mood within the palace walls. Catherine had woken before dawn, finding William already up and standing by the window still in his pajamas, watching the rain streak down the glass. They had shared a quiet cup of tea together in their sitting room, speaking in whispers to avoid waking the children too early. The departure schedule had been carefully orchestrated to minimize media attention, while still allowing for a proper family farewell. William would leave from a private airfield, but first there would be time for final moments at home. Catherine had insisted on this, knowing that rushed goodbyes at an airport would haunt them all for months. At breakfast, the children were unusually subdued. Charlotte picked at her porridge while Louis kept looking toward the door as if expecting his father to disappear at any moment. George sat straighter than usual, clearly trying to live up to his promise to be helpful, but his young face couldn't hide his sadness. "Remember," William said, addressing all three children as they sat around the familiar breakfast table, "I'll think about you every single day. When I wake up, when I go to sleep, and many times in between. And every time I help someone over there, I'll remember that I'm teaching you about what it means to care for others." Charlotte suddenly burst into tears. "But I don't want you to teach us from far away. I want you to teach us here." William immediately went to her, lifting her onto his lap and holding her close. "Oh, sweetheart. I know it's hard. It's hard for all of us, but sometimes grown-ups have to do difficult things. And when I come back, we'll have so much time together. I promise." Catherine watched this scene with her heart breaking, knowing that she would be the one dealing with moments like this every day for the next 6 months. She would be the one comforting tears, answering difficult questions, and trying to fill the gap that William's absence would leave in their daily life. After breakfast, the family spent their final hour together in the garden, despite the light rain. They walked along the paths that William had helped design, past the vegetable garden where he had taught George to plant carrots, around the small pond where Charlotte loved to look for frogs. Louis rode his tricycle in circles with William walking beside him, treasuring these last simple moments of normalcy. When the time came to go inside and gather William's final belongings, the reality of the situation hit everyone with full force. The children became clingy, each wanting individual time with their father. Catherine found herself memorizing details she had never paid attention to before. The way William's laugh sounded when Louis told him a silly joke, how he automatically straightened George's collar when he hugged him, the gentle way he wiped Charlotte's tears. The palace staff had assembled in the main hallway to say their farewells. Many of these people had served the family for years, and their genuine affection for William was evident in their faces. Mrs. Henderson, who had been with them since George was born, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief as she wished him well. At 11 o'clock, the car arrived. Catherine felt her stomach drop as she saw it through the window, black and official and final. This was it. No more delays, no more precious extra minutes. William would walk out that door and their life would change completely. The family gathered in the entrance hall for their final goodbye. William knelt down and hugged each child individually, whispering something private to each one. Catherine watched George nod seriously at whatever his father was telling him, saw Charlotte cling to William's neck as if she could keep him there through sheer will, noticed how Louis seemed confused by the grown-up's emotions, but hugged his papa extra tight anyway. Then it was Catherine's turn. As William stood and turned to her, she felt as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Everything else faded away. The watching staff, the waiting car, even their children standing nearby. For a moment, it was just William and Kate, just the way it had been when they were young and the future seemed limitless and uncomplicated. "I love you," she said simply, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," he replied, pulling her close, more than I can ever express. Take care of our babies. Take care of yourself. And remember that every day I'm gone is one day closer to coming home." They held each other for what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Catherine could feel his heartbeat against her cheek, could smell the familiar scent of his cologne, could feel the strength in his arms that had always made her feel safe. She tried to memorize it all, knowing she would need these sense memories to sustain her through the lonely months ahead. When they finally pulled apart, both of their faces were wet with tears. William picked up his small personal bag and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back one last time, his eyes taking in the scene, his beautiful wife, his 3 precious children, the home they had built together. "I'll be back," he said firmly, as much to himself as to them. "I promise I'll be back," and then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the sudden silence of the hallway. Catherine stood frozen for a moment, feeling as if part of her had just walked out that door with him. Charlotte was the first to break the silence, running to the window to watch the car pull away. "There he goes," she said quietly, pressing her small hands against the glass. "There goes Papa." Catherine joined her children at the window, and together they watched until the car disappeared completely from view. The goodbye was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. The silence that followed William's departure was unlike anything Catherine had ever experienced. Even with 3 children in the house, the absence of his presence seemed to create a vacuum that no amount of activity could fill. The rest of that first day passed in a strange, dreamlike state where everything looked the same but felt completely different. The children handled the initial shock in their own ways. George threw himself into his schoolwork with unusual intensity, as if academic achievement could somehow bring his father back sooner. Charlotte became unusually quiet, carrying around a small photo of William that she tucked into her school bag and pulled out whenever she thought no one was watching. Louis, still too young to fully understand the duration of the separation, kept asking when Papa would be home for dinner. That first evening was the hardest. They had always eaten dinner together as a family whenever possible, and the empty chair at the head of the table seemed to dominate the room. Catherine found herself setting 5 places out of habit, then having to remove William's plate and cutlery with hands that shook slightly. She tried to maintain cheerful conversation, asking about everyone's day and making plans for the weekend, but the effort felt enormous. Bedtime brought its own challenges. William had always been involved in the nighttime routine, helping with baths, reading stories, and tucking each child in with their own special goodnight ritual. Now Catherine had to handle it all alone, moving from room to room, trying to provide the comfort and security that had always been shared between 2 parents. "When will we talk to Papa?" Charlotte asked as Catherine brushed her hair before bed. "Soon, sweetheart. He needs a few days to get settled, and then we'll be able to call him regularly." "But what if he forgets us while he's gone?" The question came out small and worried. Catherine set down the brush and turned her daughter around to face her. "Charlotte, look at me. Papa could never ever forget us. We are the most important thing in his whole world. Even when he's far away, he's thinking about us. In fact, I bet he's thinking about you right now." It was true. Catherine had been thinking about William constantly since he left, wondering what he was doing, whether he had arrived safely, if he was missing them as much as they were missing him. The first few days would be the hardest while they waited for confirmation that he had reached his destination safely. The second day brought practical challenges that Catherine hadn't fully anticipated. George had a football match that William had promised to attend, and the disappointment on their son's face when he realized his father wouldn't be on the sidelines was heartbreaking. Catherine cheered extra loudly, took extra photos, and promised to send them all to Papa, but she could see that George was struggling to hide his hurt. That afternoon, Charlotte had a meltdown over something trivial, a broken crayon that on any normal day would have been quickly forgotten. But these weren't normal days, and Catherine recognized the tears for what they really were, grief for the family unit that had been temporarily broken apart. "I hate this," Charlotte sobbed as Catherine held her. "I hate that Papa had to go. I hate that people far away need help. Why can't other papas help them?" Catherine didn't have good answers for these questions because she was struggling with similar feelings herself. The rational part of her mind understood and supported William's decision, but the emotional part felt angry and abandoned and overwhelmed. The third day brought the call they had all been waiting for. Catherine's phone rang just as they were finishing breakfast, and William's name appeared on the screen. Her heart leaped with relief and longing as she answered. "You made it," she said, not bothering to hide the emotion in her voice. "I made it," William confirmed, and she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "It was a long journey, but I'm here safely. How are you? How are the children?" Before Catherine could answer properly, all three children had crowded around the phone, each wanting to talk to their father. She put the call on speaker so everyone could hear, and for a few precious minutes they felt like a family again. William told them about the airplane ride, about the new place where he was staying, about the people he had already met who needed help. "Are you taking care of Mama?" he asked George specifically. "I'm trying, Papa, but she seems sad even when she smiles." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes at her son's perceptive observation. She had been trying so hard to stay strong for the children that she hadn't realized how transparent her emotions had become. After the children reluctantly handed the phone back to her and went to get ready for school, Catherine stepped out into the garden for a more private conversation. "I miss you so much already," she said quietly. "The house feels wrong without you." "Everything feels wrong. I know," William said. "I miss you too. I miss the children. I miss our life together. But Kate, I'm already seeing why I needed to come here. The situation is worse than what we knew from the reports. These people desperately need the attention that my presence can bring." Catherine knew he was right, but knowing it intellectually didn't make the emotional reality any easier. "How long do you think you'll actually need to stay? Could it be less than 6 months?" There was a pause that told her everything she needed to know. "It might be longer," William said gently. "I'm sorry, love. I know that's not what you want to hear." The possibility that the separation could extend beyond the planned 6 months hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had been counting down the days until his return, and now even that timeline was uncertain. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "I thought I was strong enough, but William, I feel like I'm drowning. The children need so much, the royal duties continue, everyone expects me to handle everything perfectly, and I just miss you so much." "You are strong enough," William said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. And you're not doing this alone even though it feels that way. You have help, you have support, and you have me even from far away." They talked for another few minutes before the connection became too poor to continue. As Catherine hung up the phone, she realized that while it had been wonderful to hear his voice, it had also made his absence feel even more acute. The call had reminded her of everything she was missing, everything their family was missing during this separation. Standing alone in her garden, Catherine made a decision. She could spend the next month simply surviving William's absence, counting down the days and waiting for life to return to normal, or she could find a way to thrive during this challenging time, to grow stronger and to help her children do the same. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make the most of whatever time lay ahead. 3 weeks into William's absence, Catherine had begun to find her rhythm as a single parent, though the adjustment had been far more difficult than she had anticipated. The palace had rallied around her and the children, with staff members going above and beyond their usual duties to provide support. But the emotional weight of carrying the family alone was something that no amount of practical help could fully address. The children were adapting in their own ways, each showing remarkable resilience that both impressed and worried Catherine. George had become intensely protective of his mother and siblings, often stepping in to help with tasks that weren't really his responsibility. She caught him one evening trying to fix a loose handle on Charlotte's bedroom door, something William would have done automatically. "George, sweetheart, you don't need to worry about things like that," Catherine said gently, taking the screwdriver from his small hands. "But Papa always fixes things," he replied seriously. "Someone has to do it while he's gone." The comment broke Catherine's heart because it revealed how much pressure their eldest son was putting on himself. That night, she had a long conversation with him about how being helpful didn't mean trying to replace his father, and that some responsibilities belonged to grown-ups alone. Charlotte had channeled her emotions into art, filling sketchbook after sketchbook with drawings of their family together. Her pictures always showed the 5 of them holding hands or hugging, and she had started leaving them around the house as if they could somehow make her father's presence more real. Catherine found them tucked into books, slipped under pillows, even taped to the bathroom mirror. Louis remained the most confused by the situation. He had begun having nightmares, waking up crying for Papa and needing extra comfort to fall back asleep. Some nights, Catherine would find herself lying in his small bed, stroking his hair and singing lullabies until he drifted off again. Those quiet moments in the darkness often brought her own tears, as she struggled with feeling inadequate to meet all of her children's needs. The public side of her role had become more challenging as well. Catherine had always shared royal duties with William, and now she found herself representing the family alone at events where she had expected his support. The media attention felt more intense, with photographers and reporters analyzing her every expression for signs of how she was coping with her husband's absence. During a visit to a children's hospital the previous week, a young patient had asked her why Prince William wasn't with her. "My daddy goes away for work sometimes too," the little girl had said. "But he always comes back for my birthday. Will your husband come back for yours?" Catherine had managed to answer cheerfully and appropriately, but the innocent question had stayed with her. Her birthday was still months away, and there was no guarantee that William would be back by then. The uncertainty was perhaps the hardest part of the entire situation. Their scheduled video calls had become the highlight of each week, though they also brought their own challenges. The technology was often unreliable due to William's location, and the calls were necessarily brief due to security concerns. Seeing his face on the small screen made everyone happy, but it also emphasized how far away he really was. During their most recent call, William had looked tired in a way that worried Catherine. The work he was doing was clearly taking its toll, and she could see the strain in his eyes even through the poor video quality. "Tell me something good," he had said. "Tell me about something normal and wonderful that happened this week." Catherine had shared the story of Louis learning to tie his shoes, of Charlotte winning a prize at school for her artwork, of George scoring his first goal in football. These small victories felt precious when shared with William, but also painful because he was missing them all. "I wish I could be there for these moments," William had said, and Catherine could hear the regret in his voice. "I know. We all wish that too, but we're saving up all the stories to tell you when you come home." The conversation had been interrupted by technical difficulties, and they lost the connection before they could say a proper goodbye. Catherine had stared at the blank screen for several minutes, feeling the distance between them more acutely than ever. Later that week, Catherine made a decision that surprised even herself. She announced to the children that they were going to start a special project, creating a detailed diary of their time while Papa was away. Complete with photos, drawings, and written accounts of everything that happened, it would be their gift to him when he returned, a way to share all the moments he was missing. The project galvanized the family in an unexpected way. George took charge of the written entries, carefully documenting their daily activities and important events. Charlotte contributed drawings and helped take photographs. Even Louis participated by dictating his thoughts and feelings for the others to write down. "Today I made a castle with blocks," he dictated to Catherine one afternoon. "I wish Papa could see it, but it fell down before Mama could take a picture. When Papa comes home, I will make an even bigger castle and it won't fall down." The diary project gave them all a sense of purpose and connection to William. They began planning each page carefully, wanting to show him not just what they were doing, but how they were thinking and feeling. Catherine found herself looking forward to these documentation sessions, as they forced the family to focus on positive moments and achievements rather than dwelling on what they were missing. One evening, as they worked together on the diary at the kitchen table, Charlotte looked up from her drawing and made an observation that stunned Catherine with its wisdom. "Mama, do you think Papa is keeping a diary too, about the people he's helping and what he's learning?" "I think that's very possible, sweetheart." "Why do you ask?" "Because then when he comes home, we can read each other's diaries and learn about all the things we did while we were apart. It will be like we were together even when we weren't." Catherine smiled at her daughter's insight, realizing that Charlotte had stumbled upon something profound. They were all growing and changing during this separation, learning things about themselves and each other that might not have emerged if their life had continued unchanged. While she wouldn't have chosen this challenge, she was beginning to see that it might also be teaching them valuable lessons about resilience, independence, and the strength of their family bond. As she tucked the children into bed that night, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced since William left. a cautious optimism about their ability to not just survive this separation, but to emerge from it stronger than before. 2 months had passed since William's departure, and Catherine had settled into a new normal that she never could have imagined. The sharp edges of grief had softened into a manageable ache, and she had discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The children had adapted remarkably well, though they all still counted the days until their father's return with the dedication of mathematicians. The family diary project had evolved into something beautiful and comprehensive. What had started as a simple documentation effort had become a rich record of their growth and experiences. George's writing had improved dramatically as he took his role as family chronicler seriously. Charlotte's artistic skills had flourished under the pressure of capturing important moments. Even Louis had begun dictating increasingly complex thoughts and observations. But it was during the 8th week of separation that everything changed. Catherine was in her office reviewing schedules for upcoming royal engagements when her private secretary knocked urgently on the door. "Your Royal Highness," she said, her face pale. "There's been an incident." "We've received word from the mission headquarters." Catherine's blood turned to ice. The words she had been dreading for weeks were finally being spoken. She had always known that William's mission carried risks, but hearing that something had actually happened felt surreal and terrifying. "What kind of incident?" she managed to ask, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "There was an attack on the relief convoy yesterday. Several people were injured, including Prince William. He's alive," she added quickly, seeing Catherine's face go white. "But he's been hospitalized with serious injuries." The room seemed to spin around Catherine as she processed this information. William was hurt, thousands of miles away, and she couldn't get to him. The careful strength she had built up over the past 2 months crumbled in an instant. "How serious?" she whispered. "We don't have complete details yet. He's conscious and stable, but there are concerns about internal injuries. A medical team is being flown in, and arrangements are being made for the best possible care." Catherine's mind raced through 1,000 terrible possibilities. What if his injuries were worse than they were saying? What if complications developed? What if she never got to tell him all the things she had been saving up for his return? "I need to go to him," she said firmly. "I need to be there." "Ma'am, the security situation makes that impossible right now. The area where he's being treated is still considered extremely dangerous. The Royal Protection Team strongly advises against travel to the region." Catherine felt trapped and helpless in a way that was almost unbearable. Her husband was hurt and alone, and she couldn't reach him. Every instinct she had as a wife and a mother was screaming at her to get on a plane immediately. But the rational part of her mind knew that putting herself at risk would only create more problems. "The children," she said suddenly. "Do they know?" "Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first about how to handle the information." Catherine closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. George was old enough to understand the implications of what had happened, and trying to hide it from him would be impossible. Charlotte and Louis would need the news delivered in a way that didn't terrify them, but prepared them for the uncertainty ahead. "I'll tell them myself," she decided, "tonight after dinner. And I want hourly updates on his condition, even if there's no change." The next few hours passed in a blur. Catherine went through the motions of her afternoon duties, but her mind was thousands of miles away with William. She found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for updates, dreading bad news. When evening came, she gathered the children in the sitting room where they usually worked on their diary project. The pages they had created over the past weeks were spread across the coffee table, a testament to their life without their father and their determination to share it with him when he returned. "I have something important to tell you about Papa," she began, her voice carefully steady. All 3 children immediately sensed the gravity of the moment. George sat up straighter, Charlotte moved closer to her mother, and Louis stopped playing with his toy car. "Papa was hurt yesterday while he was helping people. He's in the hospital, but he's going to be okay." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Charlotte started to cry. Not the dramatic tears of a child's tantrum, but the quiet, devastated crying of someone whose worst fears had come true. "How hurt?" George asked, his voice much older than his 10 years. "We're not sure yet, but the doctors are taking very good care of him, and he's getting the best treatment possible." "Is he going to die?" Louis asked with the blunt directness of a 5-year-old. "No, sweetheart. Papa is not going to die. He's hurt, but he's strong, and he's going to get better." Catherine hoped desperately that she was telling them the truth. The uncertainty was agonizing, but she couldn't let her children see her own fear. That night, none of them slept well. Catherine found herself moving between bedrooms, comforting one child after another as they processed the news. Louis had the worst nightmares, waking up calling for his papa in a way that broke Catherine's heart. Charlotte cried quietly into her pillow, and George lay awake staring at the ceiling, clearly thinking through all the implications of what might happen. At 3 a.m, Catherine's phone finally rang with an update. William's condition had stabilized, and while his injuries were serious, the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. The relief was so overwhelming that Catherine actually felt dizzy. But even with the reassuring news, everything had changed. The comfortable routine they had established was shattered by the reality that their separation might end very differently than they had planned. The countdown to William's return had become a race against time for his recovery. The next morning, Catherine made another decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She announced that they were going to accelerate their diary project, working to complete it as quickly as possible. "Why, Mama?" Charlotte asked. "Because Papa needs to know how much we love him and how proud we are of him. And when people are hurt and scared, love helps them heal faster." It wasn't entirely logical, but it gave them all something positive to focus on during an impossibly difficult time. They worked with renewed purpose, creating the most beautiful pages yet, filling them with messages of love and hope and determination. As Catherine watched her children pour their hearts into this project, she realized that William's injury had taught them something crucial, that love wasn't just about being together, but about carrying each other through the most difficult moments, even when separated by thousands of miles. 6 weeks after the attack, Catherine stood once again at the window where she had watched William leave 4 months earlier. But this time her heart was full of anticipation rather than dread. William was coming home. His recovery had been slower than anyone had hoped, but steady and sure. The doctors had finally cleared him for travel, and in just a few hours he would walk through their front door. The children could barely contain their excitement. They had been awake since dawn, checking the clock every few minutes and asking if it was time yet. The family diary was complete, bound in a beautiful leather cover that Catherine had commissioned specially. Every page told the story of their time apart, but more importantly, it told the story of their enduring love and connection. George had written the final entry the night before. "Tomorrow, Papa comes home. We learned that we are strong even when we are apart, but we are strongest when we are together. We can't wait to show him everything we did and learned. We missed him every day, but we know he was doing important work. We are proud of him and proud of us too." The recovery period had been challenging in ways Catherine hadn't expected. Video calls with William had been limited due to his medical condition, and when they did talk, she could see the pain he was trying to hide. There had been moments when she wondered if the mission had cost more than it had given, but William's reports from the field told a different story. His presence had made a real difference, bringing international attention to a crisis that had been largely ignored. The past month had also brought unexpected growth for their family. The children had developed a new level of independence and resilience. Charlotte had discovered a talent for leadership, often organizing activities and helping Louis when Catherine was busy. George had matured in ways that both impressed and concerned Catherine, taking on responsibilities that revealed his natural tendency towards service and duty. Catherine herself had changed too. The experience of carrying the family alone had shown her capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. She had handled crises, made important decisions, and managed both her royal duties and her family with a confidence that felt new and hard-won. While she never wanted to repeat the experience, she was grateful for what it had taught her about her own strength. Now, as she prepared for William's return, Catherine felt a complex mix of emotions. Joy and relief dominated, but there was also nervousness about how they would all readjust to being together again. They had all changed during their time apart, and their family dynamic would need to find a new balance. The sound of cars in the courtyard made her heart leap. She called to the children, who came running from various parts of the house. Together they gathered in the entrance hall, the same space where they had said goodbye months ago. The parallel was not lost on any of them. When the door opened and William appeared, Catherine's first thought was how different he looked. thinner with new lines around his eyes, but also with something deeper in his expression. The experience had marked him, just as it had marked all of them. For a moment, no one moved. They all simply looked at each other, taking in the reality that they were finally in the same room again. Then Louis broke the spell by running straight to his father, launching himself into William's arms with complete abandon. "Papa, Papa, you're really here." William caught him carefully, mindful of his still healing injuries, but his face transformed with joy. Catherine watched as Charlotte joined the embrace, followed more slowly by George, who was trying to maintain his dignity, but clearly thrilled to have his father home. When William's eyes met Catherine's over their children's heads, the months of separation melted away. All the phone calls, all the worry, all the lonely nights couldn't diminish what they meant to each other. She joined the family embrace, and for the first time in months, she felt complete. Later that evening, after the children had reluctantly gone to bed following extra-long story time with their father, Catherine and William sat together in their private sitting room. The family diary lay open between them as William carefully examined each page. "This is incredible," he said softly, running his fingers over one of Charlotte's drawings. "You captured everything. I feel like I was here for all of it." "We wanted you to see how we grew while you were gone," Catherine said, "but also how much we missed you every single day." William closed the diary and reached for her hands. "Kate, I'm so sorry." "Sorry for leaving, sorry for getting hurt, sorry for putting you through all of this alone." "Don't apologize," she said firmly. "What you did mattered. The work you accomplished, the attention you brought to that crisis, the people you helped. I'm proud of you." "We're all proud of you. But the cost was high," Catherine agreed. "But we survived it. More than that, we learned that our family is strong enough to handle whatever comes our way. The children learned about service and sacrifice and resilience. I learned that I can carry more than I thought possible. And you learned that sometimes the most important work requires the greatest personal sacrifice." William was quiet for a moment, processing her words. "I know the mission was successful, but I kept thinking about whether it was worth what it cost our family." "It was worth it because it was the right thing to do," Catherine said. "And because we're all here together now, changed by the experience but not broken by it." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and feelings that couldn't be conveyed in brief phone calls. William told her about the people he had helped, the children who reminded him of George and Charlotte and Louis, the moments when her strength had sustained him from thousands of miles away. Catherine told him about the challenges she had faced, the growth she had seen in their children, the way the experience had deepened her understanding of what it meant to be part of a family dedicated to service. As they prepared for bed, Catherine realized that the goodbye that had shaken their nation had led to a reunion that would strengthen it. Their family had been tested in the crucible of separation and sacrifice, and they had emerged more united than ever. The next morning, Catherine woke to find William already up, standing at that same window where their journey had begun. But this time, instead of preparing to leave, he was watching their children play in the garden below, making up for months of missed moments. "Any regrets?" she asked, joining him at the window. William wrapped his arm around her and smiled. "Only one. I regret that it took being apart to fully appreciate how extraordinary our life together really is." Outside, their children's laughter drifted up from the garden, a sound that had been missing from the house for months. Their family was complete again, marked by their experience but strengthened by their love. The goodbye that had once seemed impossible to bear had led them back to each other, and they were home.